All right. So I just want to begin by debriefing our October symposium. You should have all received an agenda of what we're going to be discussing yesterday. So I just wanted to begin by hearing feedback from what you thought if you were present at the October symposium where we had Lucky join us and speak about perpetrator engagement and responsibility. So is there anything that particularly worked for you, or how might we improve the experience moving forward?
I'll start us off. So I was not able to attend the live presentation, but I did view the recording afterwards and I loved it. I think the content was super good. I think from the perspective of like good constructive criticism, I have to share though that I had a really difficult time following the presenter in some instances because it was just a little bit too lax in terms of the delivery. And I know this is hard, so we're starting off with like some hard discussion early. But I think I personally felt very distracted by the presenter style that took away from some of the content for me, and it was just a little bit difficult. But outside of that, I loved the guide. I think the material was super good, and that's something that we should have actively in discussion moving forward. But she was a little bit difficult for me. Don't leave me hanging.
No problem. I appreciate your honesty, Katie. And thank you for following along with the asynchronous version. Is there anyone else who may have attended live or asynchronously that had any thoughts just about the content or the delivery?
I did attend, although I was only able to attend the first hour. I didn't get a lot of the content. I noticed, when we're on Zoom, we have to do a lot more front loading in the beginning to get connection and everything. So I similarly had a little trouble following him, but I was able to check in on some of the materials. I thought some of the materials seemed to be useful. And so far I was only able to speak with one member of our department who found the approach very good, had very, very high marks about the content. I can't be more specific because I wasn't there for the part that he was referring to that he thought was particularly good content.
If I may, I appreciate the feedback. And Katie, I think that your comment is actually extremely helpful, because I'm wondering if the content was easier to follow if you were participating live, because I did have an opportunity to join for the entire session, and I had shared with Melissa and Michael, I don't know if I liked the presentation more or if I liked the reaction from those who attended more, because the comments that they were making throughout the presentation were so positive, and so many people had shared that they felt like they were in the room together, that it didn't feel like it was taking place over Zoom. And everyone seemed to be really engaged. And it's interesting, and I appreciate that you brought that up, because I was talking to my team about the potential for subrecipients wanting to contract with LUC in terms of being able to bring the training in. And somebody had said, well, what about a pre-recorded session? And so I think that knowing that watching something pre-recorded probably would not be as effective as having more of an interactive opportunity with LUC.
Yeah, I think that's really fair. I couldn't see like comments in the recording happening. So now that I know that there's a little bit more context to that, makes more sense. But I do agree that like if you're watching from like a pre-recorded situation. And maybe this is just me like being conditioned to the government, because that happens too. You kind of like, you have like this like grit, black and white sort of structure when it comes to presentations. And Luck for sure was not that. Like he was very like creative and had lots of discussion and stuff like that. So I definitely feel like I missed out on that opportunity for that type of interaction.
Yeah, I think that's really important feedback for that reason specifically. So thank you.
Unfortunately, I hadn't had a chance to watch it because I'm still adjusting to the time. I just got back from Europe from vacation. So, but I am very excited now hearing everyone's feedback. So I'm looking forward to actually watching the recording and then give my feedback to the team, and I'll send out an email or just talk with Melissa. So yeah, thank you. I'm excited about that.
Wonderful. Thank you, Manisha. And I do want to give a big shout out to Denise Wyatt. She was the person on the advisory committee who referred Luck and gave me that contact. So I just want to thank you for facilitating that connection. And again, it was well received by everyone who was present, and it's great to hear feedback about how it can be improved for asynchronous use. So again, thank you so much, Denise, for that recommendation.
You're welcome. I'm sad I didn't get to attend. I was out on medical leave for a few weeks. I'm just coming back this week.
No worries. I hope that your recovery is going well. Well, at this time, I wanted to share some of the feedback that we received from the evaluations. From the evaluations, they were relatively positive. People rated Luck's session as well as the symposium of 4.8 out of 5 possible stars. So that was really exciting to see. As for what folks are interested in seeing moving forward, I did receive feedback about more intervention type techniques. So that's something that is at the forefront of my mind as I continue to think about our upcoming symposia that we have for the upcoming 2022 year. And I wanted to share that in order to take those next steps, I reached out to the University of Southern California's Adolescent Trauma Treatment Center. I was referred to them by David Love, who is our summer symposium speaker and also a longtime ATSEP recipient. And Michael and I had the opportunity to meet with Dr. Cheryl Linktree over there, who was one of the developers of an intervention style called, let me just pull this up really quick, Integrative Treatment of Complex Trauma for Adolescents. And there's also a child version. So in our meeting with Dr. Linktree, we just discussed the possibility of her being able to deliver a presentation. And she was very interested in joining us either in winter or in the spring. And I realized in that conversation that there is more information that I needed from you all just about the clients that you serve, just so that we're able to make sure that the training that we're bringing is really reflective of the child clients that you serve. So I'm wondering if you all can speak a little bit more to the age range of clients you serve and the average length of treatment that child victims are in through the AT program or other Cal OES funding that you may have.
I'm sorry to ask you to repeat that, Melissa. I got frozen there for about 10 seconds. Missed the last paragraph of what you said.
No problem, Becky. I'm just asking what the age range of child clients you serve with your AT funding and the length of treatment for those child clients.
I'll go. So under our KC program, we serve 17 and, well, 18, not 18, but right under 18. So 17 and under for mental health. And we don't have a cap on the services. So there is no specific amount of time. We do see most of our kiddos for at least a year, sometimes 2. And they'll close out. And then once court comes back, then they return to get prepared for court. Because in Fresno County, it can sometimes take up to 5 years to close their cases.
I will second what Denise says. With our Child Advocacy Center, we also see under 17. But we usually will see them, like she said, maybe 2 to 3 years as they go through the whole court process. And then with COVID extending it even more, it's like going on 4 years. So we do have those kiddos in treatment. Some of the kiddos are maybe too small to communicate. We don't have 0 to 5, so it's mostly 6 to 17.
Okay, I'll go. So this year, the overwhelming majority of kids that we have served are 0 to 12. And then we have our 13 through 17 crowd. We have a couple of Cal OES grants that specifically focus on child abuse and foster youth. So between the child abuse treatment grant, we also have the underserved victims grant, and we are a partner on the countywide XC grant here in Riverside County, which was focused on families that have children and need additional services of all crime types. What we've done is it's a combination for us. We usually will case manage people for up to a year. That's like our business standard. But what will typically happen is if the criminal justice system is involved, then the Division of Victim Service Advocate will follow with them in our centers throughout the county. And then the other component to that is the larger majority of the kids that we serve come from families with active domestic violence. And because of that, we really just serve the family as long as they'll allow for us to, because it takes so many years to regain your stability after dealing with DV, especially when we're dealing with survivors who have extreme poverty. So typically if people are a little bit doing better, more financially in terms of their economic system, we won't see them as long. They'll move on to other different services, but usually our kids with extreme hardship we see for quite a long time. So it's hard to tell it like a specific time period.
At CORA, we provide services to kids, individual as well as multiple groups. We provide 18 to 20 groups a week. For adults as well as children, we are partnered with First 5 for 0 to 5. And under chat, we provide services to kiddos 6 to 17. So 6 months to a year, it depends on as Katie said, that, the risk factors and the stability and the support family needs. And so that's what CORA does.
I would say the same is true for us in terms of length of treatment. We really, since the children and families we see on our Cal OES grant are families who have no other eligibility anywhere else with either health insurance or Medi-Cal or other county contracts, we really try to stay the course in terms of whatever length of service is needed for good enough treatment outcomes and resolution. Because there isn't another entity or organization to whom we could refer, at some point during this. I'd say the length of the ages of children we see on this grant are really any age from probably a few children as young as 5, 6, and 7 through age 17. We find that many of the adolescents who we see in therapy might not initially be referred for some instance of child abuse. Has it been reported? The family and the child themselves may not think that what they've experienced rises to the threshold of being child abuse. But upon initial screening and assessment, we find that to be the case. Not so true with younger children who are referred. They might be directly referred from child welfare social services, where part of the reason for referral is the history of child abuse in the family.
Wonderful, thank you. Is there anything else that you wanted to share, Jessica, just about the population that Plow Family Community Development serves?
Yeah, so for us, we do serve youth. Usually we consider youth from 5 to 18, but then we also have some of them that fall under the under 24 category. But a lot of the youth that, well, at least that I see that we serve is kind of coming secondary to the parents that we're serving, especially those coming in for domestic violence services, where it's kind of more supportive services on mom's behalf. But we don't have a time frame on what like services look like, as long as they're still reporting and we can still help them out, and they're self-reporting that they are a victim of a crime, especially when it comes to domestic violence, because it does take such a long time to kind of reestablish and kind of recoup that, especially our safe house clients, where they're at our safe house up to 6 months. So however really long it takes, and as long as we're able to serve them. We also have a program that does serve and does like more workshop based services, and those are just kind of to bring awareness and more of a preventative measure, and a way to kind of bring out resources to the kids.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much. That helps me just share back with Dr. Langtree about what we may be looking for. The reason why I'm asking this question is because there's two different versions of the ITCT training. There's a child version, which is for 8 to 12, and then an adolescent one, which is 12 to 18. So getting a better scope of the children that you serve helps me better understand what might be a better fit. She also did offer to do a combination of both. So I'm wondering if you all feel that that might be the best way to go about asking for this training. And I also want to provide a little bit more context around ITCT, just since I know that it was new for me. In conversations I had with other ATCEP recipients, I knew that it was relatively new for them. So just to provide a better scope of what this is, it primarily focuses on complex trauma, and the interventions are assessment and evidence-based. The model has been around for about 20 years, and the project was initially funded by the National Child Trauma Stress Network between 2001 to 2009, excuse me. And then USC onboarded as a partner in 2005. There's a few books that they have published on this, and there's more available resources that they have just on guides for mindfulness, self-injury, substance abuse, implementation. And they've also brought this training internationally. So there's two separate components. There's the ITCT for children and adolescents, as I mentioned before, and then it can also be customized to fit whatever interests us. So areas that I was told that this can be taken to is attachment and relational processing. So just modeling the design to address the complexity that children may experience, and also acknowledging that this can be used in both short-term and long-term settings. So there's a lot of flexibility with this approach to treatment, and it's something that I thought may be of interest, but I just wanted to share more about what it is to see if that sounds like it might be something that you would be interested in learning more about before taking next steps to share with the possible presenter about what population you all serve. So with all that information, I'm wondering, does this sound like it would be of interest to you and your staff?
I would say yes. The only thing is that depending if it's your clinical staff who's attending, who would probably make more resource of it as they're looking at assessment tools or anything screening tools, techniques, and interventions. Then you're thinking if you're doing the family dynamic, you're doing individual treatment, any collaborative and coordination of care. It would probably behoove them. And then if you're doing specifically like your child techniques are very different from what you'll have from an adolescent who's much more savvier, maybe more resistant to participate in treatment. For an overall coalition, it'd be great to do a combination, but I guess it would depend to each recipient how they want to specify their treatment at their programs. But it sounds very interesting, and if they're evidence-based, so it's great for outcomes. It's great for keeping a track of their progress throughout treatment. It'd be great. It's coming out of the same format as a kind of like the trauma focused CBT with all the assessments and the EBT, the evidence-based treatments for it. Yeah.
Wonderful. Does anyone else have any initial reactions to that? I see Manisha, you said yes, sure in the chat.
Yeah, I mean, especially when you mention complex trauma, I think at least some of the youth I see coming through our doors, there is a lot of, complex trauma. It's not just one thing that's at the forefront. Even when it comes to like family violence, that's not the only thing of just being exposed to it, but like maybe other issues of like housing instability, the violence that they do see, and then any other kind of violence that may have been inflicted upon them or even their siblings. So I think for me, that's what drew my attention with the complex trauma of there's so many layers that kind of come in with some of the kids that we're serving that it'd be nice to kind of have that tool of how to address some that layered kind of trauma that does come through our doors, so we know how to assess it correctly, and it's not like, well, we're experts in this one specific thing when there can be so many other things going on as well.
Yeah, and I think, Manisha, I see you echoing the intersectionality of the traumatic experiences. It's definitely a focus that I heard Dr. Linktree sharing. It's just that's also at the forefront of her understanding. She also does come from the domestic violence field and spent some time as a program director over at Stewart House down in LA. So I know that she definitely is grounded in what it's like working in the field and brings that experience and really does have a knack for assessment, as she shared with Michael and I. So I'm hoping that this will be a good fit for what you're all looking for. I heard Sharon say, it would be a really good fit for the clinical team, but thinking about ways for other people who may be on staff to participate is something that I can definitely look into more. Is there anything, Michael, that you'd like to share that I may have missed from our meeting with Dr. Linktree before we move on to the next agenda item?
No, except that, kind of like Lucky, she comes with access to a real wealth of tools. And actually, Melissa, maybe you can put the link in the chat that she shared with us. So it really is kind of an inroad to a deeper training resource. And it's a free training and TA resource. Well, some of it is the adolescent training is free because it's through USC, but the material, the training around child therapy is for a fee because she does it privately, but there's a lot of free open source tools that she shared.
I have a question, Melissa. Thank you, Michael. Because clinicians benefit from these trainings, and at the same time, clients who are experiencing trauma from multiple sectors, is that needs of case management is so important, because if you don't have food at the table, if you don't have a childcare, you can't engage and you can't even address trauma. It's like, would that address also kind of like, train some of the clinical case manager that training too, so they can benefit from that, so they can both work together? Like, that's what I'm looking for. Does this training? I don't know if you know about that. Okay.
But if not, that's a good point for the future topics.
Yeah, I can also reach out and circle back with you about whether that's something that's possible. We just had an introductory meeting yesterday, and also I did extend an invitation for Dr. Linktree to be present at our upcoming December meeting. If that's something that you all feel would be beneficial, just since I can only represent your voices so much. And if we're able to get her in the room, I think that would be even more beneficial. And I know that that's something that feedback that I received from the summer symposium was just you all appreciating the opportunity to meet David before he gave his presentation. So I definitely want to provide those opportunities for you to connect with our symposium speakers before we bring them. So would it be helpful then for me to invite Dr. Linktree to our December meeting just so that you can flesh out the questions? Since I can definitely ask, but I also want you all to be able to interact with her as well.
Most definitely be helpful.
Wonderful. I will do that then after this meeting, send that invitation. And I'm also wondering, just on this topic, if there's any other considerations that you'd like for CVCA to make when meeting with prospective speakers. I hear you, Manisha, when you're saying to also think about the clinical case manager and how they can also be a part of this process. But I'm wondering if there's any other considerations that you'd like us to make when meeting with speakers moving forward, just since we have 2 more symposia. So I want to make sure that I'm really being mindful of what you're all looking for.
I think it will be helpful once we kind of have recorded meetings that, you know, people who are not able to attend, like, you know, the team case managers, anyone else, that will be helpful for them to kind of hear that and take some notes on what is necessary and needed to do their job for them. Yeah. Okay.
That really is a great resource. I wasn't able to attend the David Love symposium, but I was able to get the recording. So having a library on that as a resource will be great for all current and future subrecipients, I think.
Wonderful. Yes, we did. Go ahead,
I
Becky.
was just going to say, there's one training topic, I think, just because it comes up so much in people's clinical supervision, and I think clinicians in grad school we're all trained so poorly on it, really is on the topic of family engagement. And I'm not even necessarily referring to some of the focus of the last 2 symposia, meaning like when engaging a family member who's also an offender or perpetrator. I mean, just really helping clinicians partner with caregivers. It's probably the most important ingredient in determining whether the child can develop more resiliency and benefit from the therapy. And it's the hardest part of clinicians' jobs, so they tend to avoid it and work exclusively with the child. But I believe what the real key ingredient in a therapy being successful is attention to the parent-child relationship. That's where the curative properties are. They aren't with the therapist and the child. And I think our training is usually around it's in the clinical relationship, and that's just not true. So I think I'm on a soapbox. I can feel it as I'm talking.
No, I agree with you, Becky. It's you have to have the multi-model attachment theory to the family dynamic, because as a clinician, we would see our kiddos maybe once a week, twice a week, but when they come home, the parents are the experts of that child. So they really need to build a strong attachment to be that foundation to support these children as they move forward in the healing process.
Mhm.
So your clinicians, we can only do so much. We can model, we can explain, but the homework really needs to be done in the home environment. And if the home environment is not safe, if there's so much stress going on that the parent can't concentrate on being a good provider, then everything we're trying to teach this family in our sessions is not going to be followed through, because reality hits and who's taking care of the kids? I need to work 2 jobs, whatever it may be. I do know of someone who does a multi-model of attachment theory. So I can share that with you, Melissa, and see if you want to explore that person for some kind of just like a training or just the introducing the concept. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have that name off the top of your head right now, Sharon? Just, I'm curious to know if other people may also know of this trainer.
Her name is Catherine Young, and actually she was one of my supervisors about, I would say, 5 years ago. She is now an author. She's written her books, and she's gone ahead and done workbooks and everything on the family and the multi-model attachment theory.
I think we're talking about a really good topic here. I have worked in child welfare for 16 years, but I've learned that wraparound services is the only way to work with a kiddo. You can't, there's a parent, there's a caregiver if they're in a foster home, and other important people in the systems that are involved with the child, like school system. So, and then not be afraid to communicate, of course, with all the, appropriate releases, is that how we communicate with each other so the child would have more chances to be successful and the families take the lead, not we just guide them. We had a meeting a couple of weeks ago, the school district, they were talking about the kids are coming back. There's a lot of bullying happening and what are the intervention? I said, you have to include the parents. You have to have parents buy in because you only have kids for a few hours. They go home. That's where their anchor is, So I think that we're talking about a so important topic here is that we need to kind of look at ecosystem approach, how the systems are connected with each other and how are we reaching out to other systems so families feel supported, because there will be a time when we'll step away from that family or child. So we want to make sure that they have something to hold on to or someone to hold on to.
I think that's all really good feedback, and having those wraparound services and obviously engaging the family in therapy are all things that are allowable through the child abuse treatment program. As you're probably aware, we're putting applications into award for the second year right now, and I read every single programmatic narrative, and I do see that everybody talks about including family therapy. And so it's interesting to hear that there may be more information that's needed in order to make that process more effective.
I think I'll just get briefly back on the soapbox. The aspect of it that I'm interested in is clinician avoidance of it. It's the hardest part of their jobs. It's the most intimidating part of their jobs. And there's some sort of shame about one's avoidance of it. I think because, well, for lots of reasons. So I think a lot of support is needed, but also a lot of pushing is needed by clinical supervision, because I do this training a lot in Alameda County with partner agencies. And even people who've recently finished graduate school, they really don't know what family engagement refers to. They think of it as getting the caregiver to sign the forms and checking in with them briefly once every month or two to just check in. They don't identify the caregiver as the most vital part of helping the child. And even people who've graduated recently from graduate school, they aren't trained in this way. They're really trained in a dyadic model of the clinician and the child. And that unfortunately really hasn't evolved over recent years and decades. So I really like what everyone is saying here about possible trainings. I think clinicians need this kind of support and concerted attention, I guess. I'll stop now because I can feel the soapbox about to come back again.
Becky, just wanted to kind of add to that. Fortunately, Title 4E, if you go to MSW, that focus, family systems, is the focus. So I hope that other programs also, adopt that approach to prepare the, graduates to work with the families. Yeah, I totally agree with you.
Yeah, this is all wonderful feedback. And again, Becky, don't feel sorry at all for starting this conversation. I don't want to put a pin in it if this is really what feels energizing. And it's great for Michael and I to hear too, just so that when we're meeting with prospective speakers, that's really at the forefront of what we're looking for, and we're able to best represent really what you're all hoping to gain and help to just enhance your AT services. So again, I really appreciate just all the sharing around family engagement and about how clinicians can be best supported. Is there anything else that anyone has on Symposia before we move on to calendaring our next community of practice? All right. Well, I guess I will then move into our next agenda item, which is calendaring our next community of practice. So just to again provide some context, we hosted our inaugural community of practice, back in September. And this was really an opportunity for AT subrecipients to submit questions to us. And we hosted a Q&A space with Nicole Holm. For this next community of practice, the October one got postponed just due to low registration and us wanting to work with AT subrecipients to make sure that we are holding this time at a time that's convenient for you all to participate. So in some conversations that I've had, I understand that you're all wrapping up the end of your grant performance period at the end of the year. So I was wondering if a tentative topic that may be of interest for the November community practice would just be around your program successes. I understand that we have quite a few first-time AT subrecipients both in the room, as well as some that are more experienced. So would it be helpful to make the topic of discussion maximizing funds and program successes, or what other topics might feel energizing for you all right now?
I wonder if there could be a discussion about what we were just talking about, the issue that Becky brought up. If people can share their experience and their techniques for getting clinicians to engage the family and the successes that they've had. I mean, like I said, I'm reading the narratives and I'm reading that it's happening. So I would be interested in hearing from other subrecipients what it is that they are doing to successfully engage parents and other family members. But I don't know. This is for you guys, but that was just a thought.
I'm just going to throw my 2 cents in as a former AT chat grant recipient. For us in those first 5 years when we got it, because it was the first grant we had received through Cal OES. I don't know how many are new to grants with Cal OES. Maximizing our funds would have been good for us to learn more about how not to have to revert that money, how to better spend that funding for our clients, and how to serve those people with that funding would have been huge for us to really be able to get to know prior to our grant cycle ending.
And I can add to that. For me, like, for example, with VAWA, it's so helpful to be able to go in and read about what other awardees have done and how they've strategized some of their pro tips, because it helps you really kind of get some inspiration and like think about the possibility. I think from my perspective, I find Cal OES to be super easy to work with. So that is helpful to, sometimes be able to say like, hey, we're thinking about this crazy idea. Like, does this make sense or do you hate it? Because it's helpful to have. But I would say for people who don't have that kind of relationship with their program managers, like there's a little bit of fear of like letting people know, like, I don't exactly know what the strategy is. So I think if there's a way to like allow for some learning potential and some best practices to be passed along, and for the reminder of like, no, this is what our program monitor is here for, like we can totally call you and bounce some ideas, it makes a really big difference, because I think sometimes we can lack creativity because we're trying to like stay within the guidelines of the subrecipient manual, and it's a lot of rules and can be overwhelming. So I'll take whatever help you can give me.
I agree with both Denise and Katie, because as your first year recipient, I'm thinking, okay, can I do that? Can I not do that? Let me check my, my program specialist, is that okay? And then making sure, like you said, the first year maximizing what can be used, and how it can be used. So if getting an idea of kind of combining the use of family services, how in-depth family services can I give without losing focus on the child, since it's primarily for child, abuse treatment for the kids. I don't want to get too crazy with the ideas and say like, and then someone come tell me, oh, no, you can't do that. It's only for this particular like portion. Is very stressful. Yeah. Cause I'm thinking, what can I do it? What can I not do it? What's worked for somebody else? Did it get approved for that center? Can I use it for this center? So yeah, best practices and some ideas.
I think this is a brilliant idea. And it might be even useful to, for instance, do it once a year. It was really, really helpful with your recent presentation on this, Nicole, and we had takeaways, we learned from that, but it might be interesting if it could be structured as information from Cal OES and then kind of a co-consultation among subrecipients, so that meeting could be a source of innovation for everybody. So like, Katie, the crazy idea you want to run by, somebody else might have a crazy idea, and then a third crazy idea might emerge from that is legitimate and could help us innovate our programs and reach the communities we serve better. I think it's a great idea.
That's kind of what I had in mind as I was listening to you talk is, obviously I don't work in a child abuse treatment agency. Any ideas that I have are from looking at your budgets. And so I just steal ideas and give those to other subrecipients who may be looking for ideas, but you all are the ones who know what it is that you need. And Katie, I think you bring up a really good point. We need to make sure that everybody feels comfortable reaching out to their program specialists and saying, hey, I have this crazy idea. Is it allowable? Because, when my team comes to me or a subrecipient comes to me with something wanting to know if it's allowable, we always want to come from a place of yes. We just have to make sure that we can support the yes by getting information. So there are times where I've gone back to somebody on my team and I say, I'm going to need you to get a little more information. And basically I'm like, tell me why I should say yes. And tell me, if somebody else were to look at this, how can we justify that we said yes to this? So there are very few things that would be off the table. So I think that if we structured the next meeting where I could come prepared with some ideas and suggestions, but then also have everybody else who's attending talk about things that they have used the funds for, I think that would probably be a really well-rounded discussion for everybody. And then also even things that people haven't used it for, right? Like you were saying, like, oh, I have this great idea. I don't mind being put on the spot and having to quickly figure out if it's something that we could support. So yeah, I feel like we could just kind of freeform the whole thing.
Wonderful. And yeah, that's really, Becky, how you described it as, having a brief overview or presentation from Callie and then turning it over to you all to really be the peer educators and talk about, what are your crazy ideas and have that be a space for innovation and collaboration. That's really, I think, what we're hoping for. And I'm just wondering, I was thinking November, just since our October one got postponed, since I know that this is a really busy month for all of us. Is November a good time, since I was hoping that it might work well with your timeline, just given that you have a new grant cycle coming up in January? Would it be helpful to host next month, or would this time be spent better if you all had more time to prepare, like hosting it in January per se?
I'm personally open to it.
November?
I'm good for November. I think it would help some of the recipients, if your grant is ending in December, to get those ideas on how to maximize that fund before this grant cycle ends, if you have that money to spend down.
And that might allow enough time, depending on procurement policies, to give you the time you need in order to procure things if it means buying something for the program as well.
Yeah, I've gotten a few. Novembers are okay. I'm just wondering, do you all have any time preferences in November? Since I know that with the holidays at the end of the month, it can get a little bit tricky. Do Thursdays still work well for everyone? Just trying to get a pulse on when you'd like to pencil this into our calendars, so then I can begin to share with other ATSEP recipients who aren't here today.
Thursdays work for me.
Yeah, Thursdays are fine. Depending how long would this meeting would be, like 1 hour, or would it be like maybe a 2 hour to give ideas? What's the length? Because I'm sure there's gonna be a lot of discussion.
Yeah. I would say probably an hour and a half, maybe.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. 90 minutes would be good.
And then I'm wondering, what would you think about just putting some specific topics out there so that people can start thinking a little bit about what they want to bring to the table in terms of sharing ideas. So family engagement is one of them. And then other topics that, oh, the end of my performance period and I still have $50,000 to spend. What do I do? I don't know. Maybe if we came up with a few little things to kind of get the juices flowing, and then I can throw a few things together in preparation for that, and then we can just kind of have an open discussion.
I like that a lot. I think like maybe a little bit of like pro tips on how to work with your program specialist, because like I said, it's a real thing. Like I think some sub-recipients are like, they're the boss. There's like a little misperception of like, only call them when it's official. So
Yeah,
there's some
I
of
agree
that.
with you.
And then I think the other thing, the opposite spectrum of that is like, it's very clear to me that you don't want us, dealing with our last minute budget mod issues as much as possible. Unless there's an issue. So I think, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, honestly, with the whole budget modification, that doesn't matter because you have a 60-day liquidation. We just need to get those in 45 days after the performance period ends. What I'm more concerned about is reverting.
Yeah.
And so if a budget modification means you're not reverting, or you're reverting heck of a lot less, then yeah, budget modification is not an issue. And if a program specialist has made you feel that way, I would like to know about it.
Yeah. No, I don't have that, but I think like there's like I've had the benefit of having some really good specialists that will tell us like, okay, guys, we're at the 6-month mark. Like, let's have some discussion about this. Like, how are you?
Yeah.
And sometimes you don't get that on both sides. So I think just the reminder of like, it's our job to strategically plan and figure that out too, but to not be fearful about asking questions and sort of getting experimental.
So I wonder, do you think it would be helpful to have a discussion about budget summary reports? I mean, that's something that I'm really big on, making sure that my team is sending out regularly. As a matter of fact, I meet with my team once a month to go over the budget summaries for every single program, every single subrecipient that we have, because I just want to make sure everybody is engaged and that we are not reverting funds. And if you have match to meet, that you're meeting the match. What I dislike even more than reverting funds is invoicing a subrecipient. I do not want that to happen. So that engagement is actually very, very critical to successfully managing a grant. So if you think that having a discussion about a budget summary, how to read it, what to expect with that, I can certainly talk about that as well.
I think it's helpful. I mean, I can like Dennis, we work with Dennis Hall and we hear from him like I feel like at least every 3 weeks.
Yeah.
So it's helpful to have that. But I think whatever we can do to inspire creativity, because I really think like we miss the mark sometimes in some of the relationship building that we can be having with your staff. And really just, there's a lot of things we could be doing to inspire some cool stuff.
Perfect.
Would it be helpful to invite my team to these meetings or to this next meeting?
I actually like that idea because they've worked with all the different subrecipients. And so they also have the ideas of like how to maximize that spending and what they've worked with personally with their subrecipients, because we're not going to know, like, I'm not going to know what Calico did to do their spend down or how they did their funding. But that program specialist will. So they might have even more ideas than just our small group here.
Okay.
I think like for me personally, I think what I'm most interested in is how, like, what are the little things that people are doing to leverage like filling in gaps of the needs assessment for our kids, because there's some really cool things that happen with like emergency gift cards and stability funds, stuff like that, that make a big difference.
Wonderful.
Okay.
I'm going to have to scoot off the meeting.
Yeah.
Do we have a date?
Yeah, that was the last thing that I was going to propose, since I know that we're going just a couple minutes over. I was going to propose November 18th from 9 to 10:30. Does that work for you all? I just see that we have Veterans Day the week before and Thanksgiving the week after. So I was hoping that might be a sweet spot that might work for you all, since we regularly meet on the third Thursday.
That
Yeah.
works great. Mhm.
Yeah, that should work.
Wonderful. I will get then some materials together, a registration form ready, and you all will be hearing from me very soon. So I appreciate your time. Thank you for staying a couple minutes over, Becky, and I will be in touch with you all soon. So thank you for your time and talk to you later.
Thank you, everybody. Melissa, I have a
Okay.
really quick question
Thank
for you,
you.
if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely.